So Sean had a series of continued questions that have to do with intersubjectivity and the embodiment that he was presenting this morning. And so I would like to start with the question that you still have open.
Right. This is a question about working with a teacher of meditation. And it must start out as a process that involves shared attention, where you're both attending to some process together. But then in the end, when you do your meditation by yourself, there's some difference, something that is no longer shared, but something that becomes your individual attention. So is there anything that is added or subtracted, anything lost or gained when you shift away from this kind of shared attention with someone else to your own individual practice?
There might be some difference, but of course here we are assuming that the teacher is an experienced one. Of course, one factor here is that when you are in the presence of the teacher, you have a recourse to a person who might be able to help clarify certain things that come up in the process of your own understanding and practice. In one of the very early Buddhist texts, 400 stanzas on the Middle Way, which is a 2nd century text, there is quite a wonderful passage that describes the responsibility or the skillfulness of the teacher. And it says that one needs to have a very appropriate attitude towards the student, because the student is someone who has come there to seek learning or knowledge. And also on the part of the teacher, there needs to be a very good understanding of the mental state and the inclination of the student, so that whatever is taught can be taught in a way that is most suited and beneficial to the student. And so in this way, one should be able to, in some sense, nurture the student in the most effective manner.
So there's something like, I think the whole future of the student depend on you. So you have every responsibility, and you must give teaching out of that kind of sense of responsibility and full affection on that.
When you have a high-level teacher, what is it precisely that's most important to share with the student?
So there's talking about, an advanced teacher being sensitive to at what point what needs to be shared with the student. There's a story of the previous Tushi Rinpoche, who was the teacher of Zatu Rinpoche. And so one day all the preparations have been made to receive a major ceremony, empowerment, and all the rituals facilities have been created, including the ritual cakes and so on. And so when the actual rite of initiation was supposed to take place, the teacher went to bed. He just fell, he slept. And then the student was waiting, and then finally the teacher got up and said that all of this is just an illusion. All of this is just an illusion. That was the only thing he said, and he didn't give the empowerment. So it is at that point that Rinpoche was actually received this direct introduction to the nature of mind.
And so some kind of deeper understanding about the big gap appearance in reality. To share that.
Yes, David, you have one.
David? Yes.
The body is expressing the mind. Your Holiness, I have 2 related questions. The first question would be, when an advanced student is interacting with an adept teacher, at some point the advanced student will have the chance of experiencing extremely, how to put this, ineffable, which means you can't describe them in words, mental states that are very important. And the question would be, how can the teacher, by observing the student's bodily states, know that the student has in fact experience these advanced states of consciousness? That's question one. The second question is a more general version of the first question, and that would be, in Buddhist psychology, what is said about how the body may affect various mental factors. So those questions are actually related to each other, the one being the second being an extension of the first.
With respect to the first question, I have nothing to say. There's not much I can say. So generally there is an understanding in the Buddhist tradition that there could be behavioral signs, whether verbal and physical and also emotional expressions and so on.
가서 류마가 참아를 때네 디 컨디션 다는데 다토스 거보다 유령도 더 스파이스 단들다 인텔리전스 단들 라마로 소소스도 그저 무지 결론 영어로 더 론의 주니파도 다 사디 그봐 사디는 인도산에다고 다시 그저 시작했었나 어떻게
So there is an understanding that on the basis of external behavioral science, one can infer to some degree the mental qualities of an individual, other person. So for example, there is in the text the suggestion that by looking at the way in which an individual responds in the face of suffering, whether tears flow to his eyes, and how whether the hairs of the bodily pores stand up, and so on. And not just once or twice, but over a certain period of time, one can infer the presence or absence of compassion in that person. So similarly, there are, for example, in one of the texts, a discussion of 44 different kinds of internal signs, which has correlates in the external behavioral signs as well, which are indicative of different levels of realization on the path of preparation, path of seeing, and path of meditation, and so on. So these are explicit signs, both internal and their correlates in the external behavioral. Similarly, in Vinaya, a monastic discipline text, since in the Buddhist context, the relationship between the teacher and the disciple is so important, it becomes very important on the part of the student to really examine whoever he or she wishes to take on as a teacher, to really examine whether this person is qualified to be your teacher. So there's an expression that we should not act in this matter, which has so much important significance, kind of hastily, like as if a dog was confronted with the presence of kind of bodily parts, just like lungs. The dog will immediately go and jump and eat it. So one should not behave in that manner, but rather one should apply a sustained attention and inquiry. And in some sense, it says that the word spying is used. You have to spy upon your teacher to see whether that's a quality. And there's a beautiful verse in this monastic discipline text written by Tsonawa, which is about 13th century, 14th. So there is, in fact, in this text, a citation where it says that although the fish in the lake may be not visible, they're hiding, but when there is a wave in the lake, it reveals the location of the fish. So in the same manner, although the qualities of the teacher may be hidden, but the way in which the teacher behaves, you can infer the qualities of that master. So there is that general understanding that on the basis of external behavioral kind of science, one can infer qualities. So this suggests that you have to really annoy your teacher, you have to pester him.
Then judge response.
And then judge how that person responds to your pestering, that annoying him. So, Kundalama Rinpoche once told His Holiness a story. There was a person who was meditating,
while he gave me oral transmission of
Shantideva's text. So he told the story that once there was a person who was sitting in a meditation, in meditation at one of the religious, kora, a kind of circumambulation site, and another person walked by and said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm meditating." And asked,
meditating on patience.
He said, "I'm meditating on forbearance, kyanti, sometimes translated as patience." And so this person said a rather rude word, which basically is the Tibetan equivalent to "go to hell." But it's the Tibetan equivalent of "go to hell."
Oh, you can translate that very literally in English.
Oh, really? Yeah, it means eat shit,
There we go.
It's forcing me to say this word here. And then, and without blinking, without hesitation, the meditator shouted back, "You go to hell, you eat shit." So clearly he wasn't actually doing any practice. So similarly, if the practitioner is someone who's cultivating compassion and bodhicitta, then, if you annoy them and really pester them, then you can see your teacher. Then you can see how the teacher reacts.
I think more serious. I think your question. That did somebody. At the done at the shake I am married. At the lose on the shigmudua. In a not the shade is an rugby, lose him. Shane is in a easy pungu shadow. That day, Taro Chimbakadula, Benanga, Sedu Negoki, 7 Negoki, but sem the losing the teddy, or Rawa Pungu shoes died, Benokong to tend to shoes. That Milam Negolia, Yatos, Yankoraji, Independence research. That dear Sheba Kazik Tata said the Indizane, or Ragbesh, Lungsum Shane is an Pungu to shoes died.
So, in response to your second question, David, it's an important question, and if you look at the standard or mainstream Buddhist text on whether it's Abhidhamma or Pramana, epistemological works, since these sources belong to the Sutrayana framework, there is less discussion of the role of, because these texts do not actually talk about the different levels of subtlety of consciousness, like the Vajrayana text. So then there is less discussion of the role of body in the perceptual and cognitive processes. But if you look at the Vajrayana texts, and from that perspective, since a distinction is drawn between various levels of subtlety of consciousness, coarse level of everyday experience and subtler levels of experience and very subtle levels of experience, then at the coarse level of everyday experience, then it speaks about the interaction between subtle energies and subtle consciousness. And so the grosser the level of the consciousness, the more contingent and dependent it is upon physical processes. So of course, the role of the body becomes very important. And comparatively, so for example, compared to the waking state, if you're in a dream state, the state of consciousness in a dream is comparatively more independent from the body because it is subtler. Whereas in the waking state, much of our everyday experience...
That independence is
comparatively.
Oh, comparatively.
Comparatively, yeah.
Something like, I think, more autonomy.
Yeah, more autonomous.
But let's have it. When Zangol said, that me was said, Lulia, that Lunig jewel, then, that losing the other jewel to that.
For example, there are practices in the Vajrayana context whereby you focus your attention and visualize certain things at a specific points of your body, such as the networks where many channels come together, like the chakras. Then there is a real physiological effect. So these practices are there. Physiological effect. So, in fact, it is through manipulating the physiological processes that in the practice, the movement of the coarser levels of, prana or vayu, the wind, and consciousness.
I think it is very, very clear. The grosser level of mind, so long these grosser level of mind remain active, then the deeper level of the mind will not be active.
Manifest.
Manifest.
No.
So now the method to reduce the activities of grosser level of mind, not through mental meditation,
no.
but you see the physical exercise. So it is very clear.
I mean, yogic exercise.
Yogic exercise.
And so if one wishes to study this further,
the place to go is the Vajrayana texts, because they focus more on the body-mind and mind-body interactions than does the Sutrayana.
No, that's true.
Since there is a little bit of unclarity where that boundary is between coarse and subtle, it seems that dreams, in a way, are an indication of getting more into the subtle.
That's right.
Could you explain a little bit more where that is, that boundary?
No.
Because dreams also get signals from the auditory, for instance. You can integrate that into your dream.
I don't know.
Okay.
It's not helpful if, what I have to say is not very clear in my own mind.
Adele, please.
I care very deeply about the practical implications of what we are saying here for the development and education of children. And I'd like to say a little bit about that. Sean talked about intersubjectivity and how even the newborn baby is ready to interact with the caregiver, and how important the dance is between the baby and the caregiver. Caregiver baby. Babies who are born prematurely differ in two important ways that make that dance difficult. And if parents can just be told what this difference is, it's very easy to make the correction. One thing is that they're much slower to react. So you do something to the baby and you expect the baby to react, and you don't get anything because the time frame you're waiting for is too short for that premature baby. Also, especially for men, we like to be active with the babies, but premature babies are very easily overstimulated. So what would be wonderful for a full-term baby is over, too much for the preemie. So the preemie cries, and you think, oh, I'm such a terrible caregiver. I think the baby's going to respond to me. I get no response. I think I'm going to make the baby happy. He cries. I'm no good at this parenting. And all you have to do is give a little less stimulation and be a little slower. And then the dance starts. And once the dance starts, the parent's enjoying it. And the parent thinks, I can be a good parent. And you can get it on the right track. So just with a little bit of knowledge, you can help the parent work with the preemie and get the dance started on the right track instead of on the wrong track. With very premature babies, at least in the West, we tend to separate them from their parents and put them in incubators because we think they need to be in machines. But they're showing now that what the baby needs most is to be next to the mother. And they can get the air. So they're moving too slowly to get rid of the incubators and leave them with the mother. The last thing I wanted to say is that today and yesterday you said two things that were very profound, and I would like to emphasize their implications for education. Too often we educate teachers to do specific things. We give them exercises to do or lessons to do, or this is the way you teach something. And you said the teacher has to be sensitive to where the student is. So it's not that the same procedure is right for everybody. It's the dance between the teacher and the student. You need to be sensitive to what the student needs and where the student is. And the other thing you said is that it depends on where it's coming from. My mother was very uneducated, but she was very wise. Mm-hmm. And when people would ask her for advice about parenting, she would never give them specific advice. She said to love your child. Mm-hmm. If it's coming from the right place, even if it seems like the wrong thing, it will be fine. And if you do what should be the right thing, but it comes from the wrong place, it won't be. And teachers need to hear that it's not that it's so important to have the manual of this is what you do. It's the interaction and the reading and the active thinking. And I just wanted that people should hear that. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Okay.
So, Your Holiness, I wanted to follow up with that because yesterday you mentioned something that I thought was very interesting about the role of women in leadership and compassion and as the role of women in reducing suffering and being more compassionate. And as a mom of two small children, I know that one of the ways in which I'm able to be compassionate is by having shared attention with my children. So I'm wondering what you think about the role, sort of a prediction. If we had people that are expert meditators with compassion meditation, do you think their shared attention should be better? And on the flip side, is cultivating shared attention important for the development of compassion?
Well, what do you mean by shared attention?
Actually, I wanted to ask Sean to elaborate a little bit. It's something he mentioned in his presentation today. Do you want to say a few more words about that?
About shared attention? Yeah. Well, shared attention is something that happens naturally in the development of the child. The child starts to look to the other person and see how they interact with objects in the world. So at first it's about catching the other person's eye, seeing where they're looking, and then having them look at you. If I want to call your attention to some object, I'll look at you and then I'll look at the object, and then back at you, and you will start to look there. So it's a three-way thing. It's me, you, and the object. And then we direct our attention together at the object. So basically that's shared attention. But it ties into the development of the child because the child now starts to see that things in the world will have significance for others, and they'll start to notice how they interact with those objects, and they'll learn about what the meaning of the object is or what the value of the object is. So all of that comes into play at around 9 months to 12 months of age.
But it actually continues. It continues not only to objects in the world, but how we treat other people as well. So it is part of the developmental process of learning what's important, what's not, how to behave.
So, yeah, His Holiness would. I mean, he would expect, yes, in both directions. Particularly for people who are cultivating compassion would have greater ability to sustain this shared attention. Yeah.
그냥 shared attention 시작 그냥 같이 모두.
그러죠.
Just the very foundation of developing understanding in the Buddhist tradition starts with the understanding arising from hearing. And so they don't say just pick up a book and start studying. But the foundation for learning is hearing, where very, very commonly there's a text, and the teacher is attending to the text, the students are attending to the text, the teacher then gives explanation, there may be some discussion, but it's all a shared attention, and it's coming directly from the teacher to you, and together with the text. And so that's the foundation of it. It is shared attention. On the basis of that, then you develop another level of understanding, insight, wisdom, based upon your own reflections, your own critical reflection. That can be in solitude, but it can also be on the debating courtyard, where again it's shared attention. And they're doing this for up to 8 hours a day in the great monastic universities. And finally, the insight, understanding arising from meditation. But shared attention, very important for both the hearing and the
So as Alan pointed out, he was saying that this discourse, sharing of discourse and participating in a group kind of debate is a very integral part of the Buddhist education system. In fact, there is a 4th century text by Asanga called Abhidhamma Samuccaya. Actually, this text keep coming back. It's one of the Abhidhamma texts, compendium of Abhidhamma, where he has a specific chapter on the whole question of conducting a discourse, where he talks about how in the process of exchange back and forth, new insights emerge through this interaction and process. So this kind of discussion seems to be a very important part of the learning process. So, for example, even in the case of Buddhist instructions, it's not enough for the teacher to just give one instruction and just leave it there. On the part of the students, there needs to be a lot of discussion that is important. So also on the part of the students, if that Lama teacher tells them right from the beginning that, once I've given the lecture, there will be a discussion period, then the students are likely to be much more vigilant and stay attentive. Whereas if it's only one-way monologue instruction, then the students may even take the opportunity to take a nap during the lecture.
Liz, you had a question?
So this is related to the topic of intersubjectivity. In social psychology, there's a long history of research showing the power of others on our own thoughts and behaviors. And this leads to conformity and compliance, and that can have both good consequences and bad consequences, such as in war, such as Abu Ghraib in the Iraq War. It was often thought to be due to the power of the social group. And so I'm just wondering how a meditative practice might alter the power of social others on our own actions and thoughts.
So it's not just a question of meditation. The one very important factor is the application of your own critical faculty to be able to really distinguish what's right and what's wrong. So even in the context of Buddhist instruction, there's a 2nd century text where it says that you need 3 qualities on the part of the student. One is objective, being objective and open, and that is not enough, but you need intelligence, critical intelligence.
So
Tsongkhapa, for example, writes at the beginning of his, in the opening section of his great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, he says that it's aimed to those people whose mind is not clouded by biases and prejudices, darkness of prejudices, but also is endowed with the faculty of critical intelligence, able to judge what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. And then, the 3rd quality is having an interest. So these are the three qualities of a good student: open and objective, with a critical faculty, and being interested. So in the context of a teacher-student relationship, the second quality, which is the critical faculty of intelligence, in the commentary, when it's unpacked, it says someone should be able to distinguish between what is a good explanation on the part of the teacher and what is not a good explanation on the part of the teacher, so that it's not you just take everything that the teacher says at face value.
There's
a story here. Another story.
Any gigantic Malabus and a Kiruti, Kalabri Ningorda. So that gigantic that the Leshan Jigi, Tajata Nalia, Nemari Matrix level. All this issue about
So there was a teacher had a student who was very obedient and would do basically, listen to him all the time. But one day the teacher wondered whether this student has any critical faculty of his own. So one day to test this, the teacher told the student, you should take the butter and leave it outside in the sun. So he took the butter obediently and left it outside in the sun. So of course, so although he was very obedient and listened to what the teachers instructed him, but of course, this leads to a wrong thing here. There's also a story from the Buddha's, Buddha's tales of his past lives, Jataka, and there's a story of a Brahmin who had many students. And one day the Brahmin, he was quite poor, so one day the Brahmin gave an instruction to all the students in order to test their level of critical faculty, and told them that, I'm very poor and we are struggling, and you should all go and steal something from others so that we can have more resources. And everybody went, except for one young student who was one of the Buddha's previous lives. And he said, "Teacher, you have given this instruction, but stealing is wrong. I should not, this should not be done." And then at that point, the master said, "He's this, a good student." So the application of this critical faculty is very important. Yeah.
So we were talking this morning also about another topic, which was the embodiment, and I would like to ask Sean to quickly use the next 50 minutes to start a discussion about the embodiment.
Yes, one of the questions I had was the role of body consciousness, how much attention we ought to pay to our body. And in the case of meditation, I know sometimes one starts out by paying attention to breathing. But is there a point in meditation where one transcends that body consciousness, or is that body consciousness constantly there?
So in the context of Buddhist meditation, of course, although we begin with focusing on the breath and bodily processes, so for example, in the standard, one of the most standard Buddhist meditation practices is known as the application of the four mindfulnesses: mindfulness on body, feelings, mind, and contents of the mind, or mental objects. So here you can see that although we begin from body awareness and paying attention to the bodily processes, but then gradually moves on to ever more subtler objects. So you can see that there is a kind of a progression there. In fact, if you look at the whole meditation practice in the Buddhist context, taking breath as the object focus of one's meditation is only one part of it. And in fact, one could say that it's an expedient.
Not only Buddhist, I think according to Indian tradition.
Indian tradition, classical Indian tradition. In fact, in a sense, it's a kind of a skillful, expedient approach, because the breathing process is somewhere in between. It's not that coarse, kind of a solid object, but at the same time, it's not very subtle. So, and this is something that we do. So, by taking breath as the object of your meditation, in a sense, it's providing you kind of a more convenient way of sustaining your attention and applying your attention. But if you look at the actual Buddhist textual description of the mindfulness of body, then the main focus is really on reflecting upon how body is composed, the substances that make up the body and impurities of these and so on, so that the aim here is to assist the practitioner to be released from too much grasping and attachment to body. So similarly in sensations, next level is the mindfulness meditation on feeling, where again the aim here is to assist the practitioner to move away from strong attachment and grasping at pleasurable and joyful sensations. So in many of these practices, the aim is to assist the practitioner to overcome certain forms of habitual distortions that happen in one's mind. So it's not, for example, like mindfulness of breathing is thought to be very helpful for individuals who have a tendency to be very distracted. So many internal chatter coming up all the time. For these individuals, then taking breath as the object of meditation is thought to be very helpful. And then to finish the translation earlier, Solana said that, in fact, in the Buddhist context, the main reason why cultivation of single-pointedness of mind is so emphasized is to have some kind of facility that you can then later apply in cultivating, perfecting and developing your own insight, so that eventually you will be able to use a sustained attention to gain insight into the very nature of your own self, anatma, no self, and where this is the vipassana, the insight.
Would you like to add something to